The wind was howling before the sun had even fallen behind the mountains. It came screaming down from the north like something alive, dragging the cold with it. Dust and dead grass spun through the yard of the Calder ranch, and the world turned gray. The cattle were restless, the barn creaked, and inside the ranch house, Sam Calder watched the horizon through the frost-streaked window, jaw tight, hat low. He'd known the blizzard was coming. What he didn't know was that she was coming with it. Sam was a man carved from the same earth he worked. Years of drought, loneliness, and grief had hollowed his eyes and hardened his heart. He'd buried a wife and a brother. He'd buried parts of himself, too. Now he just kept the ranch alive out of duty, to his father's memory and to a promise made long ago. He didn't believe in second chances anymore, not until that night. The first knock came faint and soft. The second one was desperate. He opened the door and found her standing there, a woman in a torn traveling coat, hair full of snow, cheeks pale as the moon. Her eyes were the color of river stones. She could barely hold herself upright, clutching something wrapped in burlap close to her chest. "Please," she whispered, voice breaking. "Please help me." Sam didn't move at first. The storm screamed louder behind her, whipping her skirt like a flag. She stumbled forward and he caught her before she fell. "You're half frozen," he muttered, pulling her inside. He shut the door and the world outside disappeared, just the sound of wind beating against wood. The woman sank to the floor, trembling. The burlap bundle slipped from her arms and landed softly on the rug. Sam looked down and saw the outline of a small child, a little girl, maybe 5 years old, barely breathing. Dear God, he knelt beside them both, unwrapping the cloth. What happened out there? The woman looked up at him, eyes wet and wild. "The stagecoach. It overturned near the ridge. The driver's gone. I walked as far as I could." The girl stirred faintly. Her lips were blue. Sam's hands were already moving, lifting the child, fetching blankets, stoking the fire higher. He didn't think, didn't question. Instinct took over, the old part of him that still cared. "What's your name?" he asked over his shoulder. "Eliza," she said softly. "Eliza Hargrove. And the girl?" Her eyes flickered with something unreadable. "Mary, my daughter." Sam nodded, though he could tell there was something she wasn't saying. But the storm didn't care for truth, only survival. The hours crawled by. The snow hit hard, burying the land in silence. Eliza slept by the hearth, wrapped in a wool blanket. The child slept beside her, breathing slow and shallow. Sam sat across the room, a rifle leaning against his knee, the firelight painting his face in golden shadow. He hadn't shared his home with anyone in years. He didn't like the way it felt now, too alive, too full of memories. But when Eliza stirred in her sleep, shivering and murmuring something like a prayer, something inside him shifted. Maybe it was pity. Maybe it was something else entirely. By dawn, the storm had sealed the door shut with ice. "You're not going anywhere for a while," he said when she woke. She looked around, disoriented, then at him. I can work for my keep," she said quickly. "I don't expect charity." "You'll rest first," he replied flatly. "Then we'll talk about work." She hesitated. "You live alone here?" "Since my wife died," he said. 3 winters ago." The silence after that was long and awkward. She lowered her eyes, nodding slightly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Sam only gave a slow nod and stood. "The barn needs checking. Stay by the fire. I'll be back." When he returned, the child was awake, sitting cross-legged on the floor with a rag doll, smiling shyly. Eliza was by the stove, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back, tending to a pot of beans. For a moment, the cabin looked like a home again, and it frightened him more than he cared to admit. "You shouldn't be up," he said quietly. She turned, surprised. "I couldn't just sit there doing nothing. You've already done so much. You nearly died out there," he replied. "You need rest." "I need purpose," she said, meeting his gaze. There was steel in her eyes, and he recognized it, the look of someone who had lost everything and still refused to break. Later that day, the storm worsened. The wind howled through the cracks like a wounded animal. The cattle lowed in terror. Sam tried to fix a broken shutter, nearly froze his hands in the process. When he came back inside, Eliza was by the window, staring out at the white emptiness. "How long do these storms last?" she asked quietly. "Long enough," he said. "Sometimes days. And the town? 15 miles south. Too far till it clears," she nodded. "Then it seems we're stuck with each other." He didn't smile, but something flickered in his eyes. "Seems that way." She hesitated, then said softly, "Thank you, Mr. Calder, for taking us in." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he walked to the fire, staring into the flames. Finally, he said, "You don't owe me thanks. Just stay alive." But when he looked at her again, his expression had softened. Just a little. That night, Eliza awoke to a sound outside. Faint footsteps crunching in the snow. Her breath caught. Sam was already up, rifle in hand, eyes sharp. "Someone's out there," he whispered. They both listened. Another sound, then silence. The wind paused, and for a brief, heart-stopping second, she thought she heard a man's voice calling her name. "Eliza." Her face went pale. Sam noticed instantly. "You know that voice?" he asked. She shook her head too quickly. "No. I must be hearing things." But he didn't believe her. The night dragged on in uneasy quiet, and by dawn the snow outside was red, a trail of blood leading from the ridge to the barn. Sam followed it in silence, rifle steady, heart heavy with suspicion. Behind him, Eliza stood at the doorway, clutching her shawl, eyes wide with fear. When he turned back toward her, she whispered through trembling lips, "I took it off." "Please," she cried, her voice breaking. "I had to take it off." Sam froze, not understanding, not yet, but he saw the fear in her eyes and the shadow behind her words. He stepped closer, and that's when he made his move. The storm had passed by morning, but the sky was the color of ash. Snow covered the plains like a shroud, smooth and endless, broken only by a trail that led away from the barn, a thin red line cutting through the white. Sam Calder followed it slowly, his boots crunching with every step, rifle gripped tight. His breath came out in clouds, ghosting the air around him. The sun fought to break through, but it was weak and pale, a cold light that gave no warmth. The world felt hollow. The storm had taken its noise with it, leaving only the sound of wind brushing over snow and the rhythmic pulse of his heartbeat in his ears. He stopped by the fence line, crouching down where the blood had begun to thin out. There was no body, just the marks of a struggle, footprints deep and erratic heading toward the ridge. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't random. Someone had been here. When he turned back toward the ranch house, Eliza stood at the door, wrapped in her shawl, staring after him with that haunted look again. The child was nowhere in sight, likely still asleep by the fire. Sam's jaw tightened. Whatever had followed her through the storm wasn't gone, and he intended to find out what it was. Inside, the cabin was warm again, but the air between them wasn't. Eliza sat at the table, her hands clasped tight, knuckles white against the wood. She watched as he set the rifle down beside him, his movements slow, deliberate. "You want to tell me what that was?" he asked, voice low. She didn't answer right away. She stared down at her hands as if the truth might be hiding there. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. "You wouldn't believe me." "Try me," he said. She looked up, eyes glistening, shadowed by fear. "The man who called my name last night. He's real. He's my husband." Sam froze. The words hit like a blow. "Your husband?" he said finally. "You told me your name was Eliza Hargrove." "It is," she whispered. "But I'm not his wife anymore." "Not really. Not after what he did." Sam leaned back slowly, crossing his arms. "Go on." She took a deep breath, and her story came out in pieces like shards of glass. His name was Thomas Hargrove, a gambler, a drinker, and a man who could charm anyone when he wanted something. He'd married her in Kansas, promised her a life of comfort and family, and then gambled away everything they had within a year. When the debts caught up, he'd taken to cruelty, first in words, then with fists. She'd endured it for the child's sake until one night he'd sold their wagon, their horse, and tried to sell something else too. Her. That was the night she'd run. "I thought he'd never find us," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. "But he always does." Sam didn't speak for a long time. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were burning. He'd seen the type before. Men who treated women like property, who hid cowardice behind violence. He'd buried one like that once. He didn't plan on burying another unless he had to. "If he's alive," Sam said slowly, "then that trail out there means he's hurt. Maybe dying, maybe not." She shivered. "He won't die easy." He nodded grimly. "No, men like that never do." The day dragged by in silence. Sam worked the ranch like he always did, hauling water from the well, feeding the horses, checking the fences buried in snow. Eliza helped where she could, but her eyes kept drifting to the horizon. Every shadow made her flinch. Every creak of the wind made her look toward the ridge. The child, Mary, played quietly by the fire, humming to herself. She was too young to understand the danger, but not too young to feel it. She clung to her mother's skirt whenever Eliza moved across the room. Sam watched them both from the porch more than once that day. The mother who carried secrets in her eyes and the little girl who laughed in spite of them. It stirred something he'd long buried, something that scared him more than the man in the snow. That night he didn't sleep. He sat by the window, rifle across his lap, staring into the dark. Snow drifted lightly again. Not the heavy storm from before, but a quiet dusting that whispered against the glass. The fire burned low, painting the room in flickering amber. Sometime past midnight he heard it, the crunch of boots outside. He rose silently, heart steady, eyes sharp. He moved to the door, cracked it open, and stepped into the cold. The wind was almost still now, the stars pale behind thin clouds. And there, standing at the edge of the fence line, was a man, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a tattered duster and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low. Blood darkened his sleeve and his breath came ragged. When he lifted his head, Sam saw the glint of madness in his eyes, and the faintest smile. "You must be the rancher," the stranger rasped. "The one who took my wife." Sam didn't answer. He just raised the rifle, steady as stone. "She's mine," the man went on. "Always was. She'll tell you that once I'm done with you." "You're trespassing," Sam said, voice cold. "You're bleeding. And you're a long way from Kansas." The man laughed, a broken, bitter sound. "Oh, she told you, did she? Told you her pretty little story?" He took a step closer, hand moving toward the revolver at his hip. "You don't know her, cowboy. You don't know what she's capable of." Sam cocked the rifle. "You'd be surprised what I know," he said. The standoff lasted only seconds. The man hesitated too long. Sam fired once, the shot echoing through the valley. The stranger fell to his knees, clutching his shoulder, cursing through gritted teeth. The cabin door flew open behind them. Eliza screamed his name, not Sam's but Thomas's. "No," she cried, rushing toward them. "Don't kill him." Sam turned sharply, stunned. "What are you doing?" "He came here to—" "He's still her father," she sobbed, collapsing beside the bleeding man. "Please, Sam. Please don't let him die." Sam stared at her, disbelief flashing in his eyes. After everything she'd said, after everything he'd seen. For a long moment, the only sound was the man's labored breathing and the wind carrying snow across the plain. Finally, Sam lowered the rifle. "Get him inside," he said quietly. "But hear me, Eliza. If he raises a hand again, I'll finish what he started." Inside, the cabin was chaos. Thomas Hargrove lay on the floor near the fire, his shirt soaked with blood. Eliza pressed a cloth to the wound, trembling, whispering prayers under her breath. Sam stood over them both, eyes cold, silent as stone. The child had woken again and was hiding under the table, small hands covering her ears. The sight made something in Sam's chest ache. He'd seen too many children grow up in fear. He'd been one himself. Hours passed. The man drifted in and out of consciousness. Eliza refused to sleep. Sam stayed near the window, watching the dark, listening for more footsteps, just in case this man hadn't come alone. When dawn finally broke, soft and gray, Sam turned to Eliza. She looked exhausted, eyes swollen, hair disheveled, hands still stained with blood. "He's alive," she whispered. "But he won't be for long if we don't get him help," Sam frowned. "The nearest town's 15 miles through snow. No one's coming out here for him." She met his gaze, pleading. "Then I'll go." "You won't make it 2 miles," he said flatly. Her lips trembled. "Then he'll die." Sam stepped closer, voice low. "And maybe that's what's supposed to happen." Her hand flew to her mouth, and tears spilled freely now, not just for the man on the floor, but for everything she'd lost, for every lie, for every piece of herself she'd left on the road. "You don't understand," she whispered. "You think I want him alive. But I need him alive." Sam studied her face for a long time, then asked quietly, "Why?" She looked away, her voice barely a breath. "Because he knows something that could destroy me." The fire burned low, throwing long shadows across the wooden walls. Sam sat in his chair by the window, watching the dawn push its pale light across the snow-covered valley. The storm had passed, but the world still felt frozen, not just in the air, but in time itself. Every sound in that cabin seemed louder than it should be. The faint crackle of the fire, the soft breathing of the sleeping child, and the shallow, uneven rasp of Thomas Hargrove clinging to life on the floor. Eliza hadn't slept all night. She sat beside her husband, eyes red and hollow, hands trembling as she wiped the sweat from his brow. Her lips moved in whispers, not words meant for Sam to hear, but confessions meant for the silence. Sam didn't trust her anymore. Not fully. Not since the way she'd screamed his name out there. Not Sam's, but her husband's. That sound had cut through him like a blade. Not because of jealousy, but because of what it meant. Fear and love often sounded the same when spoken by a desperate woman. He'd seen enough of both in his time to know the difference was only clear in the end. By noon, Thomas stirred awake. His voice was weak but sharp, his eyes bloodshot and burning with something dark. He looked around the room, confusion flickering before recognition returned. "You should have killed me," he rasped, smirking faintly. "Would have been easier for both of us." Sam stood across the room, silent, arms crossed. "I might still," he said evenly. The man laughed, dry and bitter. "You think you're her savior, don't you, rancher? You think she's some lost angel blown to your doorstep by God's mercy?" He coughed, grimaced, then leaned his head back. "You don't know a damn thing about her." Eliza's face went pale. "Stop," she said, her voice trembling. "You don't know what you're saying, don't I?" He hissed. "Tell him, Eliza. Tell him what you did." Sam looked from one to the other. "What's he talking about?" She shook her head quickly. "Nothing. He's delirious. The fever." But Thomas only smiled, eyes glinting like glass in firelight. "She burned the letter," he said softly. "The one that could have saved a man's life." Sam felt something cold settle in his gut. "What letter?" he asked, stepping closer. Eliza's breath caught. She looked away, shoulders trembling, voice breaking. "He's lying. Please, Sam, don't listen." But Thomas wasn't done. "It was years ago," he said, grinning weakly. "Before she met me. There was another man, a good man. Worked for the railroad. Loved her enough to die for her." "And maybe he did." Sam's eyes narrowed. He turned to Eliza. "That true?" She didn't answer. She just pressed her hand to her mouth as if to hold back a sob. "Tell him," Thomas whispered, voice low and venomous. "Tell him how you let that man hang for something you did." Eliza suddenly rose to her feet, eyes blazing with tears. "Stop it," she cried, voice breaking like the snap of a whip. "You don't know what you're saying." But Sam could see the truth in her face, the way she wouldn't look at him, the way her hands trembled. And in that silence, something between them cracked. When Sam finally spoke, his voice was cold and quiet. "You've got until sundown to start telling the truth." She flinched, staring at him with disbelief and pain. "You don't mean that." "I do," he said. "You brought this man into my home. You lied about who you were. Now there's blood in my snow and a story I don't understand. You'll make me understand, or you'll leave when the sun does." She stood there for a long time, trembling, tears falling freely now. And then, without another word, she turned away and went out into the yard, into the snow. Sam didn't follow. The sky was low and gray again by the time she returned. Her cheeks flushed from the cold. She held something in her hand. A small tin box, rusted and worn, with the initials E.H. carved faintly into the lid. She set it on the table, then sat across from him. "You want the truth?" she whispered. "Fine." Sam nodded, eyes steady. She opened the box. Inside was a folded piece of paper, charred around the edges. What remained of it was brittle, blackened, almost unreadable. "This," she said softly, "is what he's talking about." She took a shaky breath and began. Years ago, before she'd married Thomas, Eliza had been a teacher in a mining town outside Dodge City. She'd been young, naive, and far too trusting. One winter, a stranger had arrived. A quiet man named Jonathan Reed. He worked for the Union Pacific, fixing telegraph lines, always kind, always steady. He used to bring her books from the East and talk to her about a world she'd never seen. They'd fallen in love in secret. A tender, quiet kind of love that only people with nothing else could afford to feel. But then a killing happened in town. A saloon keeper was shot dead during a robbery, and Jonathan was blamed. Someone had seen him near the place earlier that night. The sheriff came for him and Eliza. She froze. She knew the truth, that the killer had been Thomas Hargrove, a drifter who'd been hanging around her boarding house, already half in love with her himself. But Thomas had sworn he'd kill her if she told anyone. So she stayed silent. Jonathan was hanged 2 days later. The letter, she explained, had been Jonathan's last. A letter he'd written to her from his cell. In it, he'd forgiven her. He'd said he understood why she couldn't speak. that her silence would haunt her long after he was gone. He'd written, "You'll burn this one day, Eliza. You'll burn it because you'll want to forget me, but you never will." And she had burned it. The night she married Thomas. Sam sat in silence for a long time after she finished. The fire crackled softly between them. The world outside was silent and endless, snow falling again like ashes from the sky. Finally he spoke. "You should have told me." "Would it have changed anything?" she asked quietly. "Maybe," he said. "Maybe not. But lies always catch up out here." Her eyes filled again. "You think I don't know that?" He didn't answer. He stood and walked to the door, opened it, and let the cold air fill the room. "He's gonna die soon," Sam said, looking out over the ridge. "When he does, the law's coming with spring. They'll want to know who you are, what you've done." She rose, her voice barely a whisper. "And what about you, Sam Calder? What are you going to tell them?" He turned slowly. His eyes were darker now, but full of something unspoken. "Depends," he said quietly, "on what I believe when this snow melts." That night Eliza stood by the fire long after Sam had gone to his room. She held the burned letter in her hands again, staring at the edges where Jonathan's words had faded. The paper trembled between her fingers as she whispered, "Forgive me." Then, with tears streaming down her cheeks, she fed it to the flames, for the second and final time. As the paper curled and blackened, Thomas stirred in his sleep, muttering her name like a curse. And outside, beneath the pale moon, a rider watched the house from the ridge, silent, unmoving. Someone else had come. The snow had turned to ice by the time the sun disappeared behind the ridge. The land glittered under the moonlight, cold, sharp, and merciless. Sam Calder stood on the porch, staring out across the endless white, the breath leaving his mouth in thin streams. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just listened, to the faint howl of the wind, the distant crack of ice, and the sound he knew too well, the slow, deliberate rhythm of a horse moving through the snow. A rider. His eyes narrowed. The figure appeared out of the dark like something carved from it. Slow, steady, silent. Sam didn't move for a long time. He'd lived too many winters alone not to trust the instincts that now whispered danger. The way the rider sat tall in the saddle, the way the horse hesitated just beyond the fence line. It wasn't a neighbor. It wasn't lost mail or a friendly hand. No one came out this far unless they had a reason. Behind him, the cabin door creaked open. "Sam," Eliza's voice was soft, uncertain. "Go back inside," he said without turning. "What is it?" "Trouble," he said simply. The wind carried the faint jingle of reins, then a voice, deep, even, and unfamiliar. "You the man they call Calder?" Sam didn't answer. He stepped off the porch, boots crunching through snow, hand resting near the revolver at his hip. The rider came closer, stopping just short of the fence. Moonlight caught his face. Lean, weathered, a man used to riding alone. His hat was low, his coat long and dusted with frost. "Depends who's asking," Sam said. The stranger smiled faintly. "Name's Hardin, Marshal's deputy out of Fort Laramie. I've been tracking a woman. Says her name's Eliza Hargrove." Sam's muscles tensed, but he didn't show it. "What for?" The man reached into his coat slowly, pulling out a folded paper. A wanted notice, the edges worn from travel. He held it up. "For withholding evidence in a federal murder case. She ran 2 years ago." Sam's jaw tightened. The wind seemed to stop for a heartbeat. "I reckon you've seen her," the man said. Before Sam could answer, Eliza stepped out onto the porch. Her shawl was wrapped tight, her eyes wide and shimmering in the moonlight. She froze when she saw the man. And in that stillness, the truth was written across her face. The deputy nodded slowly. "Guess that answers my question." Sam stepped forward, his voice steady but sharp. "You've come a long way for one woman." "That I have," the deputy said. "And I don't plan to leave without her." "You got a warrant?" "I got the law," he replied. Sam's hand twitched near his gun. "The law don't carry much weight out here unless a man earns it." The deputy smiled, not kindly. "You willing to test that?" The standoff stretched like wire about to snap. Snow drifted between them, faint and soundless like falling dust in a graveyard. Then Thomas Hargrove's voice broke the silence, weak, hoarse, and full of venom. "Don't believe a word she tells you," he rasped from the doorway, half leaning on the frame. "She's a liar, a murderer's lover. She's guilty as sin, Eliza turned, panic flashing across her face. "Thomas, please, shut your mouth," he snarled, pointing a trembling finger at her. "You let that man hang, Eliza. You think God forgot that? You think the law will?" The deputy's expression hardened. "So it's true then." Sam's patience broke. He moved between Eliza and the stranger, voice low but burning. "That's enough. Step aside, rancher," the deputy said, hand drifting toward his holster. Sam didn't move. "She's under my roof, and as long as she is, she stays safe." The deputy's eyes narrowed. "You'd risk your neck for her?" Sam didn't hesitate. "Already have." The deputy studied him for a long moment. The wind picked up again, blowing across the ridge, carrying the faint cry of a wolf somewhere far away. Finally, the man leaned back in his saddle. "Fine," he said quietly, "but I'll be back with papers. Fort Laramie's 2 days south. When I return, she rides with me, dead or alive." He turned his horse and rode off, vanishing into the mist like a shadow swallowed by dawn. Eliza stood trembling in the doorway, her breath visible in the cold. Thomas had sunk to the floor again, coughing blood, his words dissolving into muttered curses. Sam walked back to the porch, eyes following the retreating figure until he disappeared entirely. For a long time, no one spoke. Finally, Eliza whispered, "You should have let him take me." Sam turned slowly, his face unreadable. "And let the law hang you for something you didn't do?" Her voice broke. "You don't know that I didn't." He stepped closer, his tone harder now. "Then tell me, Eliza. Tell me what really happened that night." She closed her eyes, shaking her head. "You wouldn't understand." "Try me." But she only whispered, "If I tell you, you'll hate me." Sam's eyes softened, though his words didn't. "I've hated plenty of people before, Eliza. I've never hated someone trying to survive." Later that night, long after the fire had died low, Eliza lay awake on the cot near the hearth. The snow outside had turned the world to silver. The child slept soundly, small hands clutching her mother's shawl. The only sound was the faint rasp of Thomas's breathing and the wind moving through the cracks in the wood. Sam sat by the door, his rifle across his knees. He hadn't slept in 2 days, but he couldn't. Not with danger so close, not with his mind torn between what was right and what felt right. He watched her in the half-light, the way the shadows played across her face, the way grief seemed to live in her bones. She wasn't just hiding from the law, she was hiding from herself. And for the first time since the war, Sam felt something unfamiliar. Not pity, not anger, but a deep ache for a woman he barely knew and somehow understood completely. When she finally spoke, her voice was faint, barely louder than the fire's whisper. "He wasn't innocent," she said. Sam lifted his head. "What?" Her eyes glistened as she turned toward him. "Jonathan Reed, the man they hanged. He wasn't innocent. He killed that saloon keeper. I saw it." Sam's chest tightened. "Then why lie?" She swallowed hard. "Because I helped him." Silence filled the cabin. Outside, the wind rose again, howling across the valley like the voice of something ancient and angry. "You helped him kill a man?" Sam asked quietly. "No," she said, shaking her head, voice trembling. "Not kill, escape. I was supposed to burn the evidence and the letter that proved his guilt before the sheriff came. But I couldn't. I loved him even when I knew what he'd done. So I kept it. And Thomas found it. He used it to ruin me." She buried her face in her hands. "Everywhere I go, that past follows me. And now it's caught me again." Sam said nothing. He looked toward the window where the moonlight painted the snow like broken glass. Everything in him wanted to protect her. But for the first time, he didn't know if she deserved it. Behind them, Thomas stirred again, groaning. "Don't believe her," he murmured weakly. "She's lying. She's always lying." Eliza turned away, whispering through tears, "God help me, I wish I were." By morning, the wind had gone still again. The land was quiet, but Sam could feel the storm gathering, not in the sky, but in the blood of everyone inside that cabin. And when he stepped outside, scanning the ridge once more, he saw it. A second set of tracks in the snow, smaller than a horse's, moving toward the barn. Someone had been there while they slept. The morning light crept slow and cold over the valley. The storm had passed again, but its silence lingered, heavy and unnatural. Snow glittered like frost on glass, untouched except for one thing: a line of footprints curving away from the cabin toward the barn. Sam Calder saw them the moment he stepped onto the porch. They weren't his. They weren't Eliza's. They were smaller than a man's, lighter than a rider's boot. And there was something else. A trail beside them, dragging faintly through the snow. He crouched, gloved fingers brushing the frozen prints. Whoever had made them wasn't trying to hide. That alone was reason enough for his unease to grow into something colder. Behind him, the cabin door opened. Sam. Eliza's voice trembled in the crisp air. He didn't turn. Stay inside. What is it? He glanced back, eyes hard. Tracks. Her face went pale. From the marshal? Sam shook his head. Too small. He rose slowly, his breath clouding the air, and began walking toward the barn. His boots crunched with each step, steady, deliberate. The wind was still, as if the whole valley were holding its breath. The barn door groaned when he pushed it open. Dust swirled in the light that slipped through the cracks in the roof. The scent of hay, leather, and cold metal filled the air. Inside, everything looked normal. The horses quiet, the tools in place. But the silence wasn't right. He could feel someone watching. His hand went to his revolver. Come out, he said softly. And make it slow. Nothing. He took another step forward. The hay shifted behind the stall. Sam moved fast, pulling the revolver free. A small cry broke the air. It wasn't a man. It wasn't danger. It was the voice of a child. Mary. The little girl crawled out from behind a bale, clutching something wrapped in a faded red cloth. Her eyes were wide, frightened, tearful, and her breath came out in short, shaky bursts. Mary, Sam said quietly, lowering the gun. What are you doing out here? She didn't answer. She just held the bundle tighter, whispering, Don't tell Mama. Sam's brow furrowed. He crouched down, his voice softer now. What's that you got? She shook her head fiercely, eyes filling with tears. He said not to tell. Sam froze. He? The little girl hesitated, her lip trembling. The man with the badge. For a moment, Sam didn't move. The words hung in the cold air like the echo of a gunshot. The deputy. He was supposed to be gone. Sam's pulse quickened. He glanced toward the far wall of the barn, and that's when he saw it. Footprints in the dirt newer than the rest. The deputy had been there, and not long ago. He turned back to Mary. When did you see him? Her voice was small. Last night. When everyone was asleep. What did he say to you? She hesitated again, looking down at the cloth bundle. He said Mama was going to go away soon, and he said I had to give him this. She held the bundle out to him, hands trembling. Sam took it carefully and unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a small locket. Gold, tarnished but still beautiful. The kind that held secrets more valuable than money. He opened it slowly. Inside were two faces. One was Eliza's, younger, softer, smiling in the way people only do before the world breaks them. The other was a man, not Thomas, not the deputy. Someone else. Sam recognized the name before he realized he'd spoken it aloud. Jonathan Reed. Mary nodded. He said, That's my papa. Sam stared at the child, heart pounding. The truth crashed through him like a storm breaking against stone. Mary wasn't Thomas's child. She was Jonathan Reed's, the man Eliza had once loved, the man who'd been hanged for murder. And now the deputy wanted her alive, not for what she'd done, but for what she knew. Sam rose to his feet, voice steady but shaking underneath. Mary, he said softly, did your mama ever tell you about your father? The child shook her head. She said he went to heaven before I was born. Sam knelt again, gently touching her shoulder. You listen to me, little one. You don't talk to that man again. Not him. Not anyone who comes asking about your mama. Understand? She nodded slowly, eyes glistening. Good girl, he said. Now go on back inside. Stay close to her. Mary hesitated. Is Mama in trouble? Sam forced a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. She's got me looking out for her. That's all you need to know. The girl nodded and ran toward the house, her small boots kicking snow behind her. When she was gone, Sam turned back to the locket in his hand. He stared at Jonathan Reed's face until the truth began to settle like ice in his chest. The marshal's deputy wasn't chasing justice. He was chasing a secret. When Sam returned to the cabin, Eliza was sitting beside the bed watching Thomas breathe. His fever had worsened. Sweat soaked his shirt and every breath came out ragged and shallow. She looked up as Sam entered, eyes red, hair loose around her face. Where were you? She asked. The barn, he said quietly. You should have told me, she frowned. Told you what? Sam set the locket on the table. The firelight caught the gold, making it gleam like something sacred and dangerous. About her father. Eliza froze. Color drained from her face. "How did you—" "Mary told me," he said. "And now I know why the deputy's after you." She looked down at the locket, her hand trembling. It wasn't supposed to matter anymore. "It matters to him," Sam said. "And it matters to me." Her eyes filled again, but this time the tears didn't fall. She stood slowly, gripping the back of the chair to keep herself steady. "You think I didn't try to tell you?" she whispered. "Every time I opened my mouth, I saw your face. That look of disappointment, of judgment. You think I wanted to live this lie? I did it for her." Sam's voice softened. "Then tell me the rest." "All of it." She stared at the flames for a long time before she spoke. "Jonathan Reed wasn't just a railroad worker," she said finally. "He was a messenger for the Union. He carried things, letters, money, sometimes information that men would kill for. The night that saloon-keeper died, Jonathan had something hidden in that man's office. Something that belonged to the government." She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Thomas found it first." Sam's stomach turned cold. "And what was it?" "A list," she said. "Names of men who took bribes during the war. Soldiers, marshals, even a few from Fort Laramie." She turned to him, eyes shining with dread. "You see now, Sam? That deputy's not here to bring me to justice. He's here to make sure I never speak." The room went still. The fire cracked once, sending sparks into the air. Sam felt the weight of it all pressing down on him. The truth, the lies, the danger closing in. He looked at her, then at the child asleep near the hearth. Every instinct in him screamed to run, but he'd made a promise, and promises were all a man had left when the law had turned crooked. He walked to the window, staring out at the endless snow. The world looked peaceful, but peace, he knew, never lasted long on the frontier. He turned back to Eliza, his voice low and certain. "He's coming back," Sam said, "and when he does, we'll be ready." She looked at him, tears in her eyes. "You'll fight him?" "No," he said, loading his rifle. "I'll end it." Outside, the last light of day faded into night, and far beyond the ridge, under a moon that hung like a blade, the deputy was already riding back. Not alone this time. 3 more riders followed behind him, and each carried a gun. The night before the blood came, the land went still. No wind, no sound, no movement. Just a heavy silence that settled across the valley like a held breath. The stars were sharp and cold, and the snow reflected their light in 1,000 ghostly glimmers. Sam Calder sat by the fire, his rifle on his lap, the weight of it pressing into his knees like a promise. The woman he had once taken in out of mercy was now the only person left he couldn't let go of, and he knew, before dawn broke, the world would demand he pay the price for that choice. Eliza sat across the room, sewing a tear in Mary's dress by the firelight, though her hands shook too much to finish a single stitch. Her eyes flicked off into the window, to the dark horizon where she knew the deputy would appear. Sam watched her quietly, memorizing her face. The soft glow of the fire caught the loose strands of her hair, the curve of her jaw, the sadness that had never left her eyes. He didn't know when he'd stopped seeing her as a stranger. Maybe the first night she'd begged for shelter, or the morning she'd stood barefoot in the snow, her child in her arms. He only knew this. He couldn't let them take her. Not like this. Near midnight, Thomas began to stir again. The fever had burned him hollow. His breath came ragged and his eyes were glassy. Still, the hatred in him was alive, clinging to the last ember of cruelty that had kept him breathing all these years. "You think she's innocent?" he rasped, his voice breaking like gravel under a boot. Sam turned quiet. "Save your strength. She'll ruin you." Thomas coughed, spitting blood into the cloth by his side. "She ruins every man that tries to save her." Eliza turned from the fire, eyes wet, her voice soft but steady. "Thomas, stop." He looked at her, his cracked lips curling into a bitter smile. "You'll cry for me when I'm gone. You always did. Even when you hated me. I never cried for you," she whispered. "Liar," he said, laughing weakly. "You cried for what you lost, not for me, not for him. For yourself." His hand reached out, trembling, pointing toward the small form of Mary asleep beside the fire. "And she'll grow up just like you, full of lies and shame." Sam's patience broke. "Enough." Thomas's smile faltered. He looked at the rancher, really looked at him. "You love her," he said. "God help you, you love her." Sam didn't answer. Thomas leaned back, a long breath leaving his body like smoke from a dying fire. Then you'll die for her. And he closed his eyes. This time he didn't open them again. The dawn came pale and thin, carrying the faint sound of hooves. Sam had been waiting for it, sitting by the window, his rifle loaded, his heart cold and steady. Eliza stood behind him, holding Mary close, the girl's face buried in her mother's skirt. She looked at Sam with that same quiet fear she'd carried since the night she'd knocked on his door. "You can still run," he said. "And go where?" she asked softly. "The world doesn't forgive women like me, Sam." He turned toward her, eyes steady. "Then I'll make sure it forgets." Before she could answer, he stepped out into the cold. The riders appeared from the ridge as the sun broke the horizon. 4 dark figures moving in a line, their horses steaming in the cold. The deputy rode in front, his long coat snapping in the wind, the silver badge at his chest catching the light like a blade. They stopped at the fence line. The deputy dismounted, boots sinking into the snow. "Morning, Calder," he called. "Didn't think I'd find you still here." Sam stood still, rifle in hand. "You've got what you came for. Take it and go." "Oh, I intend to," the deputy said, a slow grin spreading across his face. "But you've made this harder than it needed to be." "You sent a child out to meet you in the dark," Sam said coldly. "You'll answer for that before this day's done." The deputy shrugged. "The child wasn't my concern." He looked toward the cabin. "The woman is." He took a step forward. "She's coming with me." Sam lifted the rifle. "She's not." The deputy smiled, pulling his revolver. "You really want to die for her?" Sam's eyes didn't waver. "I've been dying since the day I buried my wife. This is the first thing worth it." The first gunshot shattered the silence. Snow exploded from the fence post beside Sam. He dove to the side, rolling behind the water trough, firing back once, twice. One of the deputy's men went down hard, clutching his chest. The others dismounted and spread out, rifles in hand. Eliza screamed from inside the house. Mary cried out, her small voice breaking through the thunder of gunfire. Sam gritted his teeth and fired again, taking another man from his saddle. The deputy shouted orders, his voice echoing through the valley. "Burn it if you have to. She doesn't leave alive." The barn caught fire first. The flames rose fast, licking the frozen air, throwing sparks into the sky. The horses screamed. The smell of smoke and gunpowder filled the world. Sam moved like a man possessed. Fast, ruthless, desperate. He took cover behind the wagon, reloading with shaking hands, his breath coming in white bursts. The deputy moved closer, crouching behind the corral. "You can't win, Calder," he shouted. "She's guilty. The whole territory knows it." Sam yelled back, his voice raw. "Then let the territory come take her." Another shot rang out, sharp, close, clean. The bullet tore through Sam's shoulder. He stumbled, blood staining his coat. But he stayed on his feet, firing again. One of the men dropped, and the last rider turned and fled into the snow. Only the deputy remained. The world went quiet except for the crackle of the burning barn. Sam limped toward him, gun raised, eyes burning. The deputy stood now, revolver aimed, breath coming hard. "You're a damn fool, Calder." "Maybe," Sam said. "But fools sleep better than cowards." They fired at the same time. The deputy fell first, Sam fell second. The snow turned red beneath him. Eliza ran from the cabin, Mary clinging to her skirt, tears streaming down both their faces. She knelt beside him, her hands pressing against the wound. "No," she whispered. "No, please. Please stay with me." Sam smiled weakly. His hand found hers. "You and the girl," he whispered, voice breaking. "Get to town. Take the North Trail. Don't stop till you see the river. Sam, don't—" "Promise me," he said. She nodded, sobbing. He looked at her one last time. Really looked. "I never believed in redemption," he said quietly. "Not till you walked through my door." And then, like the wind leaving the valley, his breath slipped away. The fire burned until morning, devouring the barn and the blood in the snow. By the time the sun rose high over the hills, the ranch was nothing but ash and silence. Riders from town would later say they saw a woman and a child crossing the river that afternoon. The woman's face half hidden beneath a scarf, her arms wrapped protectively around the girl. No one ever saw them again. And long after the ranch was gone, the locals still said that on the coldest nights when the wind howled down from the ridge, you could hear her voice calling softly through the snow. Sam, Sam, a prayer, a promise, and a love the frontier couldn't bury.